Hello, I'm Enzo, and today I'll be playing Oceanblock 2. This is part 2 of my run, so if you haven't watched part 1, I heavily recommend it, or you won't really have a clue what's going on. Since I started recording this after finishing up my last video, I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and that's why I'm kind of speedrunning, working on it. My entire goal right now is to go back to the Nether. You guys remember that massive arena I found in the last part? Well, I think I'm strong enough to finally challenge it. So that's what I want to do. I'm just preparing a ton of materials to do so. I used my elytra to fly my way over here, and I have to say, this place is insanely cool. I love the design. I've always really liked the Nether designs, the fortresses. I'm not crazy about the bastions, but it's a super neat aesthetic. I tried to activate the altar, but nothing was happening, so it's obvious I need some sort of material to activate it. I decided to check out the floor beneath the main arena, and it's super interesting. We've got a couple of these enemies that I saw in the last part. These are the things that absolutely shredded the piglins and pigmen, but thankfully I have a minigun to deal with them. Yeah, I'm still loving the minigun. I don't think I can go back to any other weapon at this point. These enemies happen to drop blazing ashes, and I'm willing to bet this is the item I need for the altar. I also have a feeling it's a Calamity reference, because if you've ever played Terraria's Calamity mod, well, this feels a whole lot like that. The boss spawns and plays some awesome metal music, even though I have music muted, but he kinda just two-shot me. I was really hoping that I would have won with my new armor and everything like that, especially with the minigun, but I had no chance at all. So I guess I'm gonna put this fight off for a while. Again, there is a slight issue when I get back. For some reason, there are two of him. I don't know if that's a visual bug or what, but more importantly, I need my gear back, and my gear is still in the arena. Thankfully, it drops the elytra into my hotbar, so I quickly equip that and fly out of there instantly. Needless to say, I just want to get home from all of this now. After raiding the Nether for a bit, I realized there is one resource I forgot to automate. Well, technically two. That is crushing down basalt and netherrack to get all of those various resources. The netherite is always going to be handy, but I'm also going to need quartz and blaze powder for a whole bunch of stuff later on, so it's best to get those automated now. Since that massive boss battle, all of my gear is almost depleted of pressure, so I'm gonna have to repressure it. To do that, I moved all of my pneumatic craft stuff and decided to build a whole new setup. I built a giant brick of thermoelectric generators because that's still my best power option. The first mild issue is the fact I forgot how thermoelectric generators work, so my first setup was not working. There has to be a uranium block on one side, well, that's the heat source, and then the cold, which is blue ice, on the other. But there I go, now it finally works and I can actually repair my gear. It's a good thing I removed the connection from the pressure chamber because that would have exploded first. Thankfully, it was just a pipe that exploded. But, much like I said, it's not pneumatic craft if something doesn't explode. For context, you guys should watch my crash landing video. Let's just say quite a few things exploded in that video. It was very annoying, but also pretty funny. Those other things were just side projects, though. I think it's time I got to some actual important stuff. The first thing I'm making is an industrial fermenter. This can do quite a few things, but it's gonna be a little bit before I can use it. I actually need to grow some stuff to, ferment first. There are quite a few options for fruits and different items I can put into the fermenter, but I decided to go for sugarcane, as it's literally the easiest to grow. There's no extra crafting or processing required. It's not the most efficient, but it still works very well. And this lets me get ethanol. I'm gonna need a few more things before I can use this ethanol, but that's one step closer to my goal. The next building I need is the industrial squeezer. I first built it out of vanilla Minecraft barrels before I realized you need immersive engineering's barrels. But with that, it's finally complete. This thing can actually create quite a few things, but I'll need it to make seed oil. And guess what? Interrupting airdrop. Right when I'm doing something important. Alright, I'm not mad at these things though. I've been getting quite a few vibrant solar panels from these things. You can't actually craft these solar panels from Ender.io normally. You can only get them from airdrops, and they're a really good source of power, especially considering how bad my generation is otherwise. To get the vegetable oil I need, I decided to go with melons. You might wonder, why melons? Well, they would definitely work better for the fermenter because they can create way more ethanol, but they are the best source of seeds that I can think of. The garden cloche grows both melon slices and melon seeds, and if you couldn't tell, I'm crafting the melon slices down into seeds. This is just the best method I could think of to get tons of seeds for all of that vegetable oil that I need. Now, ethanol and vegetable oil might seem like two random ingredients, and I assure you, they both are. They have different purposes. The ethanol is what I'm going to focus on first. Using a thermopneumatic processing plant from Pneumaticraft, I can convert liquids and materials into other super cool liquids. That orange dust up there is a catalyst. To craft it, it requires redstone, nitrate dust, and skulk, which is super interesting. I couldn't get this thing to work for a little bit because I forgot it needs to be heated to a certain temperature. With that and some air pressure, I now have crude oil. That is awesome. Getting crude oil is a major step in more power production. Actually, it can be used as a fuel. You can use Pneumaticraft to refine fuels, but I don't think they work in any generators. Now, I haven't tested it, but I don't think the process is worth it. I think it's just better to use the crude oil raw. I got a little sidetracked for a bit and wanted to do some more of the not tech stuff. You see, one thing I've been trying to figure out is this whole aquatic catalyst thing. Thankfully, and one of the reasons I love this mod pack so much, is I just had to do a bit of reading up on it and I figured out how it actually works. It's super neat. You have to beam the aquatic catalyst into the crystal. This beam can be used to purify all sorts of stuff. That's kind of a big part of this whole pack. I'm purifying these prismarine steel ingots. I need these for a few things, but most important of all, armor upgrades for my Pneumaticraft suit. It's gonna be pretty sick. The next machine I'm making is a metal press. This lets me press all sorts of ingots and stuff like that into various other items, like plates or wires. This makes creating plates and wires so much easier than before, and it's a true automated way to do it instead of the foundries or smelteries that I usually do. It took me a ton of steel and other resources to make this, but finally, the fuel generator, or I guess diesel generator, but it accepts quite a few fuels, including the creosote oil from earlier. That'll be interesting to use up, but most important of all, the crude oil that I created. That's kind of why I made it. This is going to be an excellent source of more power for all of my machinery. Besides the fact it looks awesome, it also sounds amazing, but I have to finish setting it up first, which took me a little bit because I'm not used to immersive engineering's wiring systems. And one thing I absolutely did not expect was for the wires to shock me. I guess it makes a whole lot of sense, but I was not prepared for that. If you're wondering why my screen is so zoomed out, I'm pretty sure it's one of the relics I have equipped. I removed it like halfway through the run because it was getting super annoying. And of course, an interrupting airdrop. After a bunch of reading and testing, I finally figured out how to make it all work. I was hoping to use the high voltage battery, but I don't quite have the resources for that yet. I mean, I could technically make it, but I'd have to build some other buildings to craft it first, but that stuff is for later. For now, it finally works and it sounds awesome. Having heard a generator like this in real life, I can say, yeah, it's very realistic. I love the sound of it. Alright, I've kept you all waiting for long enough. What's all of this ethanol and vegetable oil really for? Well, using a fluid mixer from Pneumaticraft, I can combine them and actually make biodiesel. It also makes glycol. It has uses in some recipes, but we're not here for that. Biodiesel is the main reason I'm doing this recipe. Biodiesel obviously can be burnt in the fuel generator. However, it has another very cool use from Pneumaticraft. If I put the biodiesel in the thermopneumatic processing plant with some redstone and enough heat, I can make lubricant. This is pretty awesome. If you're wondering what lubricant is used for, I need that to make my precious speed upgrades for all of my pneumaticraft machines. You see, you get a few of these from missions, but obviously I'm gonna want way more if I'm going to make more pneumaticraft buildings. I went back underwater for a little bit and used a silk touch upgrade on my mining gadget. My whole goal down here is to get a ton of sculk. I already said that it can be used to make the catalyst for crude oil, but it has some other very important uses with Oritech. But that's for a bit later on. I just wanted to get a bunch all at once. I also decided to finally make all of the armor upgrades for my pneumaticraft armor. You can only have 4 upgrades per armor piece, so I'm going to need 16 in total. Thankfully, they only cost 1 aquamarine steel ingot per and 3 diamonds, so it's relatively cheap to craft. Next up, I need to process that sculk that I got earlier into Endric compound. This is done in a centrifuge. Endric compound is a very important resource inside of Oritech. It lets me do quite a few things. My current goal is to make an Endric laser, which will let me do even more stuff, but it's pretty expensive because of all the base materials. I have everything to make it, I'm just a little bit concerned about the echo shards, as my only source of those is the trial spawners underwater. I'm not 100% sure how to get a warden to spawn, even though I have a couple of ideas, and my best idea is to dig out a giant vacuum hole underwater, beneath those sculk structures, so that a warden could spawn inside a room like that. I'm still not 100% sure. But you guessed it, interrupting airdrop. Now that I have the lens, everything else is super easy to get for this Endric laser. This is a super neat piece of equipment that has tons of uses for this mod. As a matter of fact, it can power other higher tier machines, which is super cool. But for now, I'm going to use it to actually mine stuff. Yes, that's something it can do. The main reason I was looking for amethyst at the end of last episode was for this. Now apparently you're not supposed to mine the crystals, you need silk touch because you want the clusters. Activating the machine was a bit messy because I had no clue what it was gonna do, but I have fluxite, and that's all that really matters in the end. Fluxite is a vital resource in later on Oritech. Now that I have it, I can do some super cool stuff. I want to convert all of these budding amethyst crystals into fluxite, so it's gonna be a little messy. So I was hoping to continue on with the Oritech stuff, but a lot of my missions are kind of out of order, so I'm gonna have to do some other stuff before that. You see, I need to fight and kill the Wither to get some nether stars, which means I'm gonna have to get Wither skeletons for their skulls. The best way I thought to do this was using hostile mob networks and get a bunch of mob data. I was still kind of on a power trip because of how awesome this minigun is, so I thought I could deal with anything in my way, and I pretty much can. But I did get ganked by a baby zombie pigman once. That was pretty embarrassing. But to be fair, baby creatures are stupidly overpowered. You guys remember that one guy that had like the longest running hardcore world and it got ended by like a baby zombie? Yeah, that speaks volumes. I'm glad I get to use the hostile neural networks mod again because it's so cool. I love just being able to create mob drops with power. That is the only downside, of course. I don't have enough power for the entire system. And by the way, I can actually use the Ender Dragon model that I got earlier to make stuff, but I realize why you get it so easily. 1. I still have no clue when you're supposed to fight the Ender Dragon. 2. The drops are pretty much useless. I think Dragon's Breath might have some uses in like magic and stuff like that, but I couldn't find any that I need it for. While I was working on transforming a bunch of coal, this odd creature spawned, and I have no clue why. I'm guessing it has something to do with this island, and that's why I thought there was a spawner down there somewhere, but it only seems to spawn at that level. That's just something I wanted to note. One of the mushrooms might have also been a casualty due to my minigun, so I have one left, but still, I have plenty of food options instead. I was getting all of that blaze coal so that I can make a ton of wither-proof glass. This is just the cheapest and easiest recipe I could find. Now, this is not the best wither arena I've ever made. There should be one block taller so that he can't fly out of it, but at least my minigun just chews through him, which is beautiful to watch. With that, I have a nether star, and I should have wither data, but I may have forgotten to collect that the first time. Whoops. Once I collect enough wither data, I don't even have to spawn him manually anymore. I can just automate it in the machines, which is super cool. Another super important thing that I need is ender pearls. The only issue is I don't have many. The few I've gotten is from looting stuff. Conveniently though, the game gives you a way to actually make a gate that spawns a ton of endermen that I can collect data from. The recipe is pretty cheap. It requires an abyssal pearl, which is just abyssal fragments that I've gotten from some of the mobs underwater. Some mineral resin, which is easy enough because you literally only need one plank of it, and a cold source. Now, I don't know exactly when I got it, but it's from one of the magic mods, I think the ARS mod. It's called Liquid Source, and that's what I have underneath the jar to give me the 800% cold bonus. I literally don't even need the cold jar for anything else. This is the one time I used it. But now that I have Enderman data, you guessed it, infinite ender pearls. It is so awesome. The craziest part is how I didn't even build a mob spawning room in this entire run. I always thought it was going to be annoying, and that's why I didn't do it, because you have to build it underwater. The reason I need all of these ender pearls and nether stars is for my next major goal, which is completing more missions. The next missions want me to upgrade the goo that I've been using. To do all this, I need a special ender crafting station, which requires a lot of ender pearls and iron. The system is better when you have more alternators, so I thought, why not? I have plenty of resources, might as well make 8. And it was definitely worth it because the ender stars take a long time to craft, even with 8 of these alternators. I'm guessing you can place way more, but I didn't try that. I can just do other stuff in the meantime. While I was waiting for those ender stars to craft, I got sidetracked again. This is kind of like a running theme in this entire pack. Ever since I got the Endric laser and Fluxite, there's one thing I've wanted to make. It's called the Fragmenter, and this is going to make getting Fluxite so much easier than before. To get the Fragmenter though, I'm gonna have to spend a tiny bit of my Fluxite to make Flux gates to actually build the machine. Just like all the other Oritech machines, it's a multi-block structure, and conveniently, one of the upgrades I got for it way earlier on increases the amount of byproducts it creates. So I'll get even more platinum, but more importantly, Fluxite out of it. This entire fragmenting process serves a few purposes. To make Fluxite, which is kind of the main one, but also gives me way more platinum, which will come in handy later on. And since my supply of amethyst is very limited, and I will need a whole lot of it for later on, I decided to make some amethyst seeds. I was really surprised they were super easy to make because of how rare and important amethyst is. Well, at least in this mod pack. I guess it is far more common in vanilla Minecraft, and far less useful. Another super cool thing I can make with ender pearls is proto-chorus. It's like, an early chorus fruit. The cool thing about this is that I can turn it into liquid chorus and then chorus chunks, which is important for integrated dynamics. You can do even more cool and complicated things with these chorus parts. It's super neat. I also got up to some awesome shenanigans with the chorus fruits. It's pretty neat what you can do with all this stuff without having to go to the end. I've had a ton of this replica ore for a while, both in chunks and some still in the deep slate, and as you can probably guess, I want to get work started on the replication mod. It looks insanely cool, especially because of what it'll let me do. Replicate most materials, as long as I feed it the base ingredients, which is just other stuff. There are quite a few base matters, that's what they're called. These are all sorts of things from like nether to metallic, precious, nature, and a few others. So as long as you break down the right stuff, you can create new resources, but you have to have that resource and scan it into the machine first, so you can't just generate whatever you want. This is a super powerful and cool system. It's easily one of my new favorite mods, but I didn't use it right at the beginning. Another funny thing I wanted to note is, in the first part I said that the ship was literally useless, it had nothing good in it. These iron trapdoors are the one thing I salvaged from it. That's pretty funny. But again, it's going to be a little bit before I seriously use this mod, but it comes in insanely handy with making some more annoying resources. Good examples being steel and compressed iron. Oh, also cast iron. Cast iron is so much easier with this thing, because they're all metallic, meaning I just throw metal, like iron, in there, and boom, I can automatically replicate them. No extra steps required. Back underwater, to the crystal and all the not tech stuff, it's time to finally use this mixer that I made earlier. I just need to put a couple of ingredients in, power all up, and it'll mix into the next tier of goo. This is Void Shimmer Goo. It's tier 3 and it can do some more cool stuff, including converting diamonds to celestite gems. Celeste? Celeste reference? But to me, it's really just a stepping stone to get to the next tier of goo that I'm looking for. And this is what I was talking about. I needed that goo to make the next tier. This tier just took some other stuff that I already had, including those ender stars that I made way earlier on. With this, I can complete a ton of missions, and more importantly, get super close to getting the Mark II depth upgrade. That will let me go even deeper than before, which is super exciting. The only issue is it's going to take me a little bit to finally get said module. If the tier 3 goo can transfer diamonds, well guess what? The tier 4 goo can transform netherite. That will be the ultimate ingot, and I'm super excited to get it. This goo requires skulk to feed, which is a little expensive, but that's another reason I harvested so much earlier on. Using goo spreading, that's how I upgraded all of it to this max tier, so I have tons of it now. Maybe a bit too much, I don't need it that badly, but this is all very exciting. Even though I got all those armor upgrades for my new Modpack armor, I was still a bit disappointed by it. This Eclipse armor looks so much better. And I mean, it sounds so much cooler. This armor can have a ton of different and super powerful upgrades to it, including, eventually, elytra and even creative flight. That sounds awesome. For now, I'm just going to take some time to make a bunch of different upgrades for my armor. I got all sorts of things, including movement speed, running speed, because they're different, no fall damage, and a crazy jump boost. And of course, the elytra upgrade, because it's literally just an upgrade template and elytra. It's super easy. It's a bit of a shame that I don't have any good surface mobs to show this off on, but I found some super neat upgrades for the bow that includes homing arrows and bouncing arrows. So it'll like hit multiple enemies with the same arrow. Again, I haven't gotten to testing this, but it would be neat to look at sometime. Another neat thing about this armor set is apparently I can go to the bottom of the ocean with it. Instead of crafting the Mark II depth upgrade, I can use this armor. The only reason I haven't tested it is because I have a flippers upgrade on my power suit, that's what I'm calling it now, so that makes swimming way faster than the Eclipse armor. And here's another good reason I don't like modern Minecraft. Now, I know Minecraft games are hosted as servers, even in single player. I have no clue when that started, but just look at this. I love the fact I can't even play my own world sometimes. I just have to restart the game to fix this, but still, it's stupid that it happens in the first place. There's so many other things I can talk about here. I do really like most of the changes they've made, especially with bamboo and cherry trees. But again, there's most of it that I don't like, and it generally has to do with the new mobs and stuff. Anyways, here's the first time I'm going to be using the replication system, and this is to make uranium. You see, uranium is very difficult to get your hands on, so I've been trying to figure out how to get more without having to make like 1,000 centrifuges and just spinning redstone for a while. Unfortunately, the developers, as usual, are smarter than me, and they figured I'd try something like this. You see, to get uranium, you need metallic matter, which is super easy, but that's not the issue. Then I need quantum material. You see the problem? quantum is the hardest to get, and it's not in many things. My best source of it is literally nether stars. So I'm going to need a ton of nether stars if I want to make a bunch of uranium. Most of the parts to make the reactor are easy enough. There is just one that is insanely annoying to make: energized steel. Now, despite the name, there's no steel involved in the process. I actually need iron and gold with all of this power mod stuff. And it's exactly what it sounds like. I throw iron and gold into that energizing orb and boom, it makes energized steel. The only issue is that I can only place one ingot in at a time, and I pretty much have to do this manually. I will automate it way later on though. It just took a while to figure out, because you can't just put all the items in hoppers. It doesn't like when you have multiple items at the same time. Really annoying system. Reactors aren't the worst to make, but they are still expensive. I can only make a 3 cubic meter one. I think that's a bit easier to say than 3 by 3 by 3. Yeah, I'll use 3 cubic meter from now on. It doesn't generate that much power, obviously, it's extremely simple, but it is at least a start. Another thing I should mention is the fact this is a basic reactor. There are actually multiple tiers of reactors, well, basic and advanced. I'm working on the advanced components, but obviously they're far more difficult to make. The advanced casings alone cost basic casing and osmium plates, which are taking a while to make. That's the main reason I don't have a better reactor up just yet. The reinforced reactor also takes an insane amount of steel. It's not even funny. I'm still creating steel normally. This is before I realized, oh yeah, I can just replicate it even easier. Since this reactor is larger, I can actually put moderator blocks in it. There are all sorts of moderators, but obviously higher tier blocks are better. In this case, I decided to use netherite because I have plenty of netherite lying around. I'm gonna need a bit more uranium, but that power generation is insane. I think this is more power generation than I've ever had before. Well, excluding the fuel generator, but I can't run that thing all the time. Almost 5 kilo RF a tick. Alright, well it's FE, which is forge energy, but I call pretty much all power RF. That's just what I've always known. The super nice thing about this new reactor is it lets me do so much more because I have more power now. The main thing I want to do is build an arc furnace. This is one of my favorite buildings from immersive engineering. It'll let me do so much neat stuff and process certain ores so much faster. And on top of that all, it'll let me make steel even easier. Again, this is before I realized I could just replicate it. After checking the manual 1,000 times to make sure I built it right, the arc furnace is finally done. There's only one tiny issue. If you guys watched my compact claustrophobia run, you'll probably know what it is. I can't actually use it just yet. I need the graphite electrodes to make it work. And for that, I need to make a second industrial squeezer, because my current one is filled up with vegetable oil. And to make the graphite electrodes, I need to throw a bunch of coke dust in there. Yes, it has to be coke coal, which you have to grind into dust. It's a super long process. On top of that, I only made 8 at the start. I actually need 12 of these to make enough ingots for 3 electrodes. Each electrode costs 4 ingots. It's only at this point that I finally had the thought of replicating steel. Yeah, I wish I thought of that so much earlier, you know, before I built that arc furnace. But hey, at least it still has a couple uses later on. It's also great for alloying resources, like making Invar and Electrum. So at least there's that. One of my small side projects has been working on some jewelry. Now, I've had a few pieces before. The main issue is that they're both random and pretty much garbage. But now that I've looted a bunch more patterns, I can actually make my own. Now, I was hoping to make an amulet, but I couldn't actually find the amulet slot. You see, my soul lantern was actually taking that up, and it's only near the end that I actually moved the soul lantern and replaced it. An airdrop happened to interrupt me, as usual, when I'm trying to record something. And after looking at all of the different effects of different items, I first learned that it's always best to go with netherite. The bonuses of other materials just aren't worth it compared to the insane effects of netherite. This amulet is super neat because it heals me whenever I get hurt. Obviously, it has a short cooldown. I've been trying to figure out what else I want to make, and I have a couple of interesting ideas. You see, I've been trying to figure out a way to buff this minigun, but I'm pretty sure it's maxed out already, considering I have quite a few upgrades on it. There is one interesting combination I found though, and that is armor penetration. I'm really hoping this applies to my minigun as well, because if it does, this much armor penetration will be insane on it. The other piece of jewelry I went for is actually armor. I was reading up on the wiki for quite a bit, and I still don't understand 100% how armor and armor toughness works, but from what I've seen, armor toughness is like a secondary armor modifier, and it has to do with armor penetration. Yeah, I legitimately have no clue. In the end, I'm guessing it's just better to go with base armor instead of armor toughness. Back to Oritech stuff. I made this duratum alloy, which requires netherite ingots and platinum. Super interesting combination. And I need this to make the atomic forge. The atomic forge is a massive step in Oritech because it lets me create a whole bunch of new items, which are all super complicated and expensive, naturally. After setting it down, it took me a few minutes to figure out how to make it work. That's mostly because you need to power it with the Endrick lasers, kinda like I was saying earlier. The more lasers you have and the more power, the faster it goes, but I'm only placing down one for now, which is good because I'm not making anything too complicated just yet. The first thing I can make is some basic silicone wafers. These require, well, silicone and carbon fiber rods. I've been making a bunch of silicone with the replicator. Again, this thing is an absolute lifesaver for specific materials. Since I need electrum for another step, I finally decided to activate the arc furnace, and it is the most awful noise I have ever heard. I mean, it makes sense because it's an arc furnace, you know, like arc welding, and I'm pretty sure this is its real life sound, but man, that is awful. I even tried to place a muffler block next to it, and that did not work. So I'm gonna be stuck with that noise if I'm ever near this thing. But hey, I guess it's worth it for its pure performance. After that, I'm working on a couple of projects all at once. My inventory is literally just filled with various items. I'm doing a bit of Ender IO, I'm doing a lot of mechanism, and one tiny little thing that's technically Ender IO. The garden cloche and the seeds are so that I can make grains of infinity seeds, because those are really annoying to get normally. All of that is so I can make slightly better Ender IO capacitors so that my machines go faster. And in mechanism, my current goal is to work my way through all of the alloy tiers. You see, mechanism has a bunch of these alloys that are difficult to make, but considering I'm going to be doing a lot of mechanism stuff soon, I'm going to need a lot of these. The first tier is super basic. It requires redstone as the chemical and copper as the item. The next tier requires the previous alloy and diamond as the chemical. Alright, that's getting a bit expensive. And then I'll have to do refined obsidian eventually, which is its whole process. I know I'm all over the place here, but there is one thing I forgot to mention. A while earlier, I made this Andromedon tablet or something like that. It's a thing from Pneumatic Craft. Pretty much you can trade in certain resources for other stuff. I was refining a bunch of platinum into gems, and I bought these platinum resource nodes. I didn't exactly know how they'd work, and I had no clue that they would be bedrock. So yeah, those are now just there, permanently. I've also been growing some Certus quartz with one of the budding crystals that I found earlier on, and this will let me start applied energetics, at least later on. I know I've said in other runs I always automate obsidian because you'll always need it in mod packs. Well, guess what? I didn't in this run for some reason, and I severely need obsidian right now. So I just set that up. I heavily regret throwing all of my crying obsidian into the replicating system because that gives a good amount of quantum, because I could really use that crying obsidian right now, so I can speed up this entire obsidian process. The reason I was working on Ender.io kind of intertwines with Mechanism. I'm using the sag mill to pulverize obsidian, which is, why I need obsidian now. I need obsidian dust so I can put it into the metallurgic infuser and infuse it into refined obsidian. This also costs diamond. This refined obsidian is what's gonna let me make refined osmium a bit later on, but it's still very valuable in of itself. Just like these other resource chunks that you see, I have to throw the refined obsidian into the enrichment chamber to increase its purity and thus chemical value, so I don't have to spend nearly as much of it to create more alloys. With the enriched refined uranium, I can finally make the final tier of alloy. This is all very exciting because this is big progress, and it'll let me make more complicated mechanism machines. This is pretty important for my next main step. You see, all of this work has been going towards making plastic. Now you might be wondering, don't you already have plastic? Well, yes, I do, but this is another way to make it. Instead of the Oritech way, I really like the Mechanism way. Granted, Oritech is probably faster and easier, as well as cheaper, but I really like Mechanism, and I don't get to play with Mechanism all that often. Now that I have plenty of Mechanism materials, I can start work on making plastic from Mechanism. This is one thing I remember from my stone block run. It's a pretty simple process. I say that, but I complicated it because I forgot some of the chemical parts. Well, I thought some pipes needed to be liquid and not chemical. Yeah, I messed some stuff up at the beginning. And naturally, I got interrupted by an airdrop in the middle of the whole process. But the entire process is pretty simple. First of all, you need some sort of organic matter. For that, I'm using a garden cloche and sugar cane. I should have made way more production because, in the end, I did not make anywhere near enough sugar cane. But you need to throw that into a crusher to crush it down into biopulp. The next machine you'll need is an electrolyzer to make hydrogen and oxygen. These are two important materials for this entire process. With the biomass from the crusher and the hydrogen from the electrolyzer, I can use those to make substrate and ethylene. The ethylene actually has to go into a condenser to make liquid ethylene because it's in a gaseous state at first. The substrate goes into another pressurized reaction chamber with the liquid ethylene to make HDPE pellets. Finally, with the oxygen and liquid ethylene, and of course the HDPE pellets, I can finally make plastic. It's a nice process because everything reuses the other materials. The only issue to note is that the liquid ethylene will actually overflow in the end, and I never got to making a proper dumping system for it. I'm not even sure how I'd do that. I know this run is all over the place, but that's just how it turned out. Another side project is still some Oritech stuff. The silicone wafers can be put in with the processing chips I got earlier, and those make more advanced parts. I mean, it makes complete sense. Then you put those advanced computing engines in with the duratanium ingots, and you get an even better item. These are super AI chips, and these will let me make even more buildings and materials, including the auxiliary processing add-on, which basically adds another process to the machine. So it'll craft two things at once, and you can place as many of these as you want, up to the core limit, obviously. I don't know what the limits are, but you can place quite a few add-ons, as I learned later on. This is also a decent time to note something you might have noticed earlier. I haven't really explained it well, but the Eclipse alloy armor actually requires power to function. How am I getting power wirelessly? Well, there are a couple of options. I could use all the flux gates and everything, but the first thing I discovered was from Pneumaticraft, oddly enough. With a specialized building, and most important of all, some air and power, you can wirelessly transfer stuff to your inventory. So this can be items or food and stuff like that, but I went with just power. I was really hoping I could transfer air wirelessly, but I understand why that makes zero sense. Another massive use of the Fragment Forge is the ability to create Endric compound with ender pearls. So instead of having to waste a ton of sculk that's still very precious, I can just use my infinitely renewable ender pearls, which is pretty awesome. The other reason I wanted to get into Mechanism is to create even more platinum, because again, the more platinum I have, the more fluxite I can get, and that's pretty important. Mechanism offers quite a few ways to create way more ore from your chunks. This is a pretty simple process. The main issue is I need a ton of salt. Salt is relatively easy to get. You just need to put some water into a jar. The issue is this process takes an unreal amount of salt. It is just insane how much it takes. Not to mention how slow the machine is. Even with max speed upgrades, it still takes a while. So I did this for a bit, but in the end, it's definitely not worth it. One of the coolest things I've found from Mechanism is the ability to upgrade the machines. Now, in this pack, the tier upgrades are kind of expensive, but I've gotten a few from like loot boxes and stuff like that. So with these, I can process more materials at the same time, and it's super fun to just have these massive factories that can process tons of materials at once. I really love Mechanism. I seriously need to use this mod more. Since I've completed all of my Mechanism goals, I decided it's finally time to make that Mark II depth upgrade. I am extremely excited. I was mildly surprised I actually had everything for it. I thought for sure I would have had to craft something else, because I feel like that's what I always have to do in mod packs, but I'm getting ludicrously close to the end game. This is so exciting. After turning in and reading the missions, it gave me a new waypoint. This is interesting. It's some sort of rift portal. I really like the lore of this whole thing because it says I can hear voices coming from the depths, or something similar to that. I have no clue what to expect down here, and I'm pretty terrified. I have not been able to go this deep up until this point, so I'm super excited to see what's down there. Now, I didn't do a ton of exploring, but I will spoil a little bit and say I did not find much good. There's no like cool ores or anything down here. It's pretty much just the rift portal that I found. Maybe I haven't looked closely enough, but let me tell you, this thing looks awesome. Like the name suggests, this is the rift portal, and this will let me go to the rift eventually, which is the final dimension. At least, I'm pretty sure. I have no actual clue, that's just my guess. This place is also full of skulk and amethysts, budding amethyst, which is the most important thing. I can use those to make more fluxite if I really want. I spent a little while exploring the depths, but again, I didn't find anything interesting. Before I start any of the risk stuff, I decided that I want to start some applied energetics, and to do that, I need to break the mysterious cubes. I have no clue when I unlocked this ability, because I know for a fact my old pickaxe couldn't do it, but this Infernium, or the blue tier essence pickaxe, I got this from an airdrop a while ago, and it seems to be able to break the cube. I broke 2 cubes, and this gives me all of the inscribing presses that I need for all of the applied energetic stuff. It's nice to have 2, because that means I can double my processing rates. Since I still need a ton of uranium because I want to upgrade my reactor for way more power, I decided, as cool as the replicator is, it's not the best way to get tons of uranium. My solution is going to be making uranium seeds to put in the garden cloche. It's going to take a while to grow tons of uranium, but still, this will be working in the background. It's a great extra source. To make these seeds, I need to make some void flame fuel. That's relatively easy. Another side project I decided to do was create more netherite. This is just going to be a simple mesh that uses crushed basalt, and with a blazing mesh, this will make pure ancient debris instead of anything else. While I was looking at seeds, I found another one I wanted to make. That's actually cyanite seeds. Now you might be wondering, why cyanite? What can I do with that? Well, I need those ingots to build a turbine. Cyanite is a byproduct of uranium in the reactors. The main issue is that I'm not creating much of it currently. I'm going to need a ton if I want to build a steam turbine, which is my current goal. To make the cyanite seeds, since they are tier 5 and not tier 4, I need to make an empowerer. This thing takes a ton of resources, all from actually additions, but as you could probably guess, I have literally everything by now. I just needed to craft everything first. To finally make the tier 5 seeds, I need the previous tier 4 seeds and some of the ender stars. Of course, these all go into the empowerer. I should really upgrade these to better conduits because it was a bit slow, but with that, I have the Empowered Rift Seeds. Awesome name for it, by the way. But these let me make quite a few tier 5 things. I could even go for stuff like emeralds or diamonds, but I have plenty of those already. The steam turbine itself primarily takes a ridiculous amount of cyanite ingots and steel, so I have plenty of both of those. It's just going to take a while to get enough cyanite ingots to build the entire thing. I don't remember the exact dimensions I made this. I believe it's 5 by 5 by either 9 or 11 or something like that. It doesn't sound like a lot, but again, I don't have the cyanite to create all the outside blocks. When I was looking at a bunch of different recipes to make netherite, I learned that it's actually best to throw these into the crusher, specifically the mechanism crusher, because it actually gives the most netherite out of any machine in the game. But it gives you dirty netherite scraps, which you then have to process inside an enrichment chamber, making this a super efficient and easy process. When I was working on some other stuff, I got this achievement when I made a vortex tube. 'Cause you're hot, then you're cold. Alright, I have to admit, that is pretty funny. And it perfectly describes what the vortex tube can do. It's like a Peltier cooler? I think that's what they're called, where one side is hot and the other is cold. You're probably wondering why I'm working on Pneumaticraft stuff now. Again, I'm just jumping all over the place. But I've been looking at some stuff in this mod, and I have a neat idea. If you guys remember from my last video, you know how much I hate phantoms. So to deal with those, I was thinking of making a guard drone to protect me from them. Unfortunately, the guard drone is very complicated to make and takes a ton of parts. If you've watched my crash landing video, you can probably guess what's going on right now. I need to make some etching acid, PCBs, and all the electronic components for them. It's the exact same process to, well, process these PCBs as in Crash Landing. I have to expose it in the UV box for a while. The longer you expose it, the higher the etching success chance is, and then I have to throw it into a bunch of etching acid. You can either use a tank, which I think that uses it up, I'm not 100% sure, or just throw it on the ground. Thankfully, these don't despawn in this version. I lost a lot of PCBs due to despawning in Crash Landing. And after crafting them together with some other electronic components I made, I can get finished PCBs, which is awesome. This is a big step in Pneumaticraft progression, and that gets me very close to being able to make drones, which is very exciting. Creating the drone itself is super simple. It's literally just some turbine rotors and, oddly enough, a sword. Well, that doesn't make much sense, but I guess it does because I need to install a minigun upgrade for it. So that's how it actually shoots things down. But I guess whenever you place it on top of a chest and you give the chest ammo, this makes me think of those drones that were just made in real life that actually have guns attached to them. Now that is something that's terrifying, but also completely awesome, I have to admit. Anyways, it's gonna take me a little bit to make all the upgrades I want on this thing, but I easily had the ability to do so. It took me about half an hour to figure out the entire drone stuff, mostly because I was attempting to program it, but I don't really know how you program these drones. It wouldn't let me put the guard drone inside of the programmer. Apparently, what you need to do for guard drones is place it on top of a chest that has a bunch of minigun ammo inside of it, and then it'll work as a guard drone. It's way better if you can give this thing a ton of range upgrades, which unfortunately I did not, but now I just have to wait a few days, and for night, obviously. With any luck, some phantoms will spawn, attempt to attack me, and this drone will gun them down. I honestly can't wait. Besides being useful in integrated dynamics, I'm going to need chorus fruit for the main mission. An insanely neat recipe I found was super simple. A flower in the middle, some chorus fruit, and nature essence. Then I could make my own chorus flower and grow even more in the garden cloche. Well, I know what I'm doing next. After I grab this next airdrop, of course. A little while later, it's nighttime and some phantoms have spawned. I stood right next to my drone because I wanted to make sure it worked. The phantoms were oddly reluctant to attack me at first. This is probably because they know I have the drone and they know what's going to happen when they come close. That's why they're sitting at the far edge of my base, just waiting for me. While I was a bit distracted, one finally decided to attack me and it got gunned down instantly. Yeah, I didn't think this mod pack could get any cooler, but I'm pretty sure it just did. That is the coolest thing I've ever seen in Minecraft. The minigun is neat, but what if you attach it to a drone that automatically targets enemies? Well, I think we have our answer. That is awesome. After all of this waiting, I finally finished up the extremely expensive steam turbine. There's only one thing left to do, and that is fill the reactor up with some water. So I need to go get that. I'm going to save us both a ton of time and explain something here. Now, I truly don't know what happened or where it's going wrong, but no matter what I tried, I could not get the water that comes out of the turbine to go back into the reactor. After a ton of messing around, which I did later on, that's not what this part is, this is me trying to figure it out, I decided instead of a closed system, which I've literally always only done, which is kind of crazy, for the first time ever, I decided to do an open system. What does this mean? Well, pretty much, the system would normally recycle the water that goes into the reactor, turns into steam, and gets condensed back into water, so it would go into the reactor again. But an open system constantly pumps new water into the reactor and dumps out water that the steam turbine creates. It's actually a better system because you don't have to balance it nearly as much. I honestly don't know why I've never used this before. Maybe I'm just stubborn and like the precision of a closed system. But yeah, with how easy water is to just generate, I'll probably be using open systems a whole lot more from now on. This is also nice because the steam turbine actually has a vent option. So instead of outputting it, it just straight up deletes the water instead. There's no extra buildings like a liquid trash can required. I had to head back down to the crystal room for a little bit to purify some chorus fruits. This process is insanely convenient, I have to admit, and I used those chorus fruits in the recipe that I mentioned earlier to make a chorus flower. Throwing one of these in a garden cloche will let me grow an infinite amount of chorus fruit, which means I don't have to worry about making more anymore. It's super neat that I can get this item because that makes my life so much easier. And it's kind of, required for one of the next missions. This recipe is oddly simple. Just a bunch of chorus fruits and a single piece of lapis. You'd think something like this would be way more expensive than it is, but I guess not. From there, I just need the goo to refine it, and I am getting super close to that beautiful, beautiful rift. It's the moment we've been waiting the entire run for, activating the portal and going to the rift. I am so excited. I don't know what I'll find there, but I cannot wait. You know the only issue? I only get to stay in the rift for 5 seconds. I cannot believe that. I knew I was only going to get a little bit of time there, but man, I did not expect 5 seconds. I feel totally scammed. Well, I guess it makes sense if you look at the next mission, because I'm gonna have to create items that will let me stay in the rift for way longer. Yes, the mod pack is nowhere near done. Trust me, guys. You know what? I felt so scammed by this that I decided, while in editing, I want to slow this down and review it to see what I have here. Obviously, this place is going to be filled with a bunch of rift mobs. That makes a whole lot of sense. The entire place looks super cool. It looks like some sort of abandoned city that has like an end/skulk or whatever the ancient cities are. I don't know what that aesthetic is, but it feels very similar to this. Unfortunately, there's not much else I could tell because, well, that's all the footage I have of this place. I have literally not gotten to return since. Alright, I'm guessing a lot of you have lost what I've been doing so far, but do you remember how difficult those super AI chips were to make earlier? Well, with some of the adamantium ingots, alright, that's definitely the wrong way to pronounce it, but it's the diamond and nickel stuff, and the super AI chips, I can make Heisenberg compressors. This has taken so many steps, it's ridiculous, meaning these things are insanely difficult to get and thus expensive. But that's just barely the start of it. You've got the superconductors. These take all sorts of materials including flux gates and dubious containers. I mean, they're not the worst to make, but still, these are super high-end items. I need these superconductors to make some advanced batteries. The advanced batteries don't do anything on their own. They're actually a super important crafting material for overcharged crystals. This is another big reason I made all of that amethyst earlier on, because I knew I would need it for these batteries. One small thing that sucks about some Oritech items is their horrible stack size. First of all, overcharged crystals do not stack for some stupid reason. What is more stupid than that? Well, super AI chips can only stack to 4. Again, none of this makes any sense. It's really just a major pain in my butt. Anyways, when I combine the Heisenberg compressors and the overcharged crystals, I get Promethium. Now this is some super cool stuff. It can be used to make a super awesome pickaxe and axe from Oritech, as well as the ultimate machine core, the highest tier. But most important of all, I need these to make rift attention crystals. I have no clue how to say that word. It's a complicated one. But pretty much these attune me to the rift and let me stay there for a bit longer. A bit later on, I got an airdrop, and at first it seemed like all the items were completely normal. However, I then got this. A creative block. Well, it's obvious that my rewards have scaled from whatever mission I completed. I'm guessing it's one of the rift ones. But this compressed iron block is insane. Now you might be wondering, well, what does it do? It might seem completely worthless at first, but the ability to control temperature of nearby blocks is insanely broken. Why? Well, this means I can set the processing plant or the fluid mixer to whatever temperature I want, making operation so much easier for whatever I want to make. Unfortunately, I don't have any real use for it, at this stage at least, but who knows, maybe I'll find a use for it later on. Either way, that is one of the coolest blocks I've gotten from the airdrops. Oh, but don't worry, I'll get something infinitely cooler later on. One of the things I've recently built is a bedrock miner, which gives me the ability to use these resource nodes. You know the only issue? I didn't know these were bedrock when I first placed them. So, this is the one time I had to cheat in this run. Of course, it wouldn't be one of my runs if I didn't have to cheat, but this is all I did. I broke the 2 platinum resource nodes and gave them back to myself. Again, this is purely because at the time I didn't know they were bedrock and that, you couldn't move them. But now that I know, I'll place them much more carefully next time. Since I'm going to need way more flux gates, I need more platinum to make more fluxite. The only issue? Well, I don't have any more platinum chunks or anything that can create fluxite. So what is my solution? There's actually a super cool recipe using insinium, which is from the occultism mod. I got a bunch of this from airdrops and I can easily replicate it. This gets turned into platinum chunks, and from there I can turn those chunks into fluxite. I really like this recipe because I don't actually know what I would do without it. I would have to harvest more amethysts and create budding amethysts. It would be a whole painful process. But thankfully I have insinium instead. The add-on that lets the machine process another thing at the same time is incredibly expensive. I mean, it's mostly the super AI chips, but there's also a flux gate in there. But it's well worth it because you can make machines so much faster with these things. The main drawback is the power efficiency, which just goes down the drain. It literally halves it. I don't know how it works if it halves it again and it just keeps getting worse. Well, it does, I just don't know if it's additive or multiplicative. I'm guessing multiplicative, but still, you get my point. As you can see with some more add-on connectors, I can actually have as many of these as I want, up to a certain limit, because machines can only accept so much energy at once. However, I forgot that there's actually an add-on for that as well, which means you can put even more energy in a machine. I don't know the real limits of these Oritech machines because I haven't truly tested them, but they're pretty awesome. And as you can see, I can process an insane amount of platinum, or other materials, in the fragment forge at the same time. Man, I love this mod so much, it's so well done. You might have also noticed these green crystals in my inventory. I made these a while earlier, and these are uranium crystals. They're pretty cheap. They're made in the atomic forge, and they require 1 copper and 2 uranium dust. These don't have any real use except for the tablet. In this tablet, this is the one where I can trade resources to get new stuff. Most important of all is these bedrock resource nodes. These can be mined using the bedrock extractor. That's another reason I'm processing so much platinum, because I want a ton of these, because I'm guessing I'm going to need a lot of platinum later on. The bedrock extractor is a 3 cubic meter structure, and for these I'm using my Ultra machine cores, and it needs to be placed on a bunch of resource nodes. It can be a 3x3 right beneath the machine. To activate it, I placed a 3x3 of uranium resource nodes down, and then I need to power it up. You see, I may have forgotten that this thing needs Endrick lasers to power itself. It may have taken me a little bit to realize that. And look at her. This bedrock extractor is beautiful. Of course, Oritech has the best animations I've ever seen in Minecraft. I'm just waiting for the uranium to actually start pumping in. Now, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm guessing the speed of this machine is affected by the amount of Endrick lasers you have and the tier of them. You know, like higher tier cores make them transfer more power or something like that. That's just my guess. For some reason, it wasn't creating uranium at the beginning, but after putting an output pipe, then it started transferring it out. I guess it kind of makes sense because Oritech wants you to use their pipes and everything like that. I was just hoping it could automatically export stuff right into a chest. Now, there are actually a few ways I can do it. Obviously, I can process it through Mechanism and get way more out of my ore. And the arc furnace that I thought was a waste earlier on comes in super handy here, because you can't just melt it right into ingots. It has to be processed in some way. So that's one neat way. But one of the coolest ways is the fragment forge. By throwing these in the fragment forge, or I believe centrifuges, you can get plutonium dust as well. The plutonium dust is used in Oritech. You can use it to make the plutonium pellets, which can either fuel reactors, or you can make nuclear bombs with. Now this is all super exciting, and I can't wait to start using these, because I am super interested in trying out the Oritech reactors. And here's the clip when I finally realized that I can just use the replicator to make steel and compressed iron. Again, I wish I'd known this so much sooner because man, it is so powerful. And again, all these cost is metallic matter. I have plenty of that from all of the metal ingots I have in storage. Another airdrop I got had a ton of goodies in it. The coolest things were obviously the plutonium pellets and the gargantuan flux storage. Man, that's another hard word to pronounce. Anyways, these have 128 million RF capacity. Okay, I know it's actually flux energy, but again, I know RF. This is awesome because I already have a flux network set up. That's how I'm transporting power wirelessly, and this will give me so much energy storage. That's nice because I don't always produce enough power. Well, I have enough for my current demands, but not later demands, so these will be super helpful. One thing I made with the spare circuit boards from Pneumatic Craft was these homing missiles. They're pretty awesome and configurable, so you can do like higher speed or higher turn rate or more damage. Unfortunately, they're also pretty stupid because they keep targeting the mushroom and apparently my armor stands. Yes, instead of smart targeting the enemies, they're going for the passive things. And as a matter of fact, I didn't know they would target the armor stands until it was too late. Either way, these handheld smart missiles are cool in theory, but not in practice. If I could just make them target only enemies, that would be so much better. But hey, it's one thing I wanted to try. You live and you learn. Before I seriously get started on the reactors, I decided to test them out in a creative world first. You see the issue? I tried a whole bunch of things, and I understand how the Oritech reactors work, but for their price, I believe they are like garbage. I mean, the setup and all the parts are super cool, but it just doesn't produce that much power. I get the taller the reactor, you have to use less fuel. That's a super neat mechanic. But to sum up a ton of testing, yes, the Oritech reactors, while cool, are absolute garbage. Extreme reactors of the same size produce way more power than their Oritech counterparts, even with plutonium fuel. But I think plutonium just makes it burn longer. I think that's all it is. It's been a super long time since I've done anything neat with redstone. However, I have to admit, this is one of the best things I've made in a very long time. I can't believe this actually worked first try. I need to automate energized steel so that I can actually make enough reactor casings to build my reactor, and this is the only way I could think of to actually automate it without stacking tons of iron or gold in there, because it won't accept stacks of both. It only accepts one of each at a time. and thus this hopper and comparator setup works perfectly. As I said in chat, I actually did something! Yes, just like Claptrap says in Borderlands 2, I could not believe it. I made a thing that works. That's awesome. That'll save me a ton of time making these reactor casings. Even though the smarter option would be to build more metal presses, I decided to make a huge upgrade to my second smeltery. Instead of 6 casting tables, I have 18, which is insane because, well, I can cast 18 osmium plates at a time. Or lead, but you know, I'm mostly doing osmium at this point, as that's what I need more of. This upgrade was not necessary, but boy is it awesome to watch. You guys shouldn't really be surprised at this point, but I certainly was. The airdrops have gotten even better again, and now I'm getting the crazy endgame Oritech stuff, and another compressed iron block. That's all awesome. Especially getting, you know, the Heisenberg compressor and overcharged crystal, considering those are insanely difficult to make right now. Even though I have a limited amount of replica ore, because I'd have to go get more from the dungeons and stuff, I wanted to make the most out of what I have. I wanted to build a massive replicator farm. You know, just like the 3D printer farms in real life, which are some of the coolest things in existence by the way, I wanted to make one of those. It took me a while to learn that replicators don't actually need energy pipes hooked up to them. They just have to be hooked up to the network, and the network automatically distributes energy. That's why it's super efficient to use a flux point, because the Oritech wires cannot supply enough power. This thing chews through energy like crazy. But that's why I'm working on my new reactor. I was originally hoping to use netherite as a moderator, but considering the size of this thing, which I believe is 13 cubic meters on the outside, so 11 on the inside, I decided to use emerald, because I have a ton of emeralds in storage, and not really much to do with them. So they make a great moderator block for reactors. As you can see with everything I can craft now, yeah, Replica is one of the best mods ever. Again, this pack just does everything right. It's got all of the best mods ever. It took me a bit to get enough uranium to fill up this reactor. Yes, that's how large this one is. It needs blocks to fuel it. Well, you could use normal ingots, but that would take way longer. Either way, look at this power generation spike like crazy. 70,000 forge energy a tick. The max is around 75,000. That's just insanity. That is more power generation than I've ever had. Actually, it's multiple times my power generation before I built this thing. Now that this is finished, I can build so many new things because I finally have the power capacity too. This is one of the big hurdles that I finally crossed, and I can actually do more stuff now. Man, I love 3D printing farms, and this one is equally as beautiful as in real life. It's so cool just to see the resources get, well, created there. I definitely have to go raid more dungeons now because I want an entire 64 array of printers. It's gonna look so good. Now that I have a very solid power source, I can finally get into applied energetics. The first step is creating an insane amount of processors with all of the templates and their respective materials. The materials I need are silicone, gold, diamond, and Certus quartz. Certus quartz conveniently can be replicated, so I have plenty of that. I don't have to worry about it anymore. I have plenty of gold and diamond, and same thing for silicone, can just be replicated. A lot of my footage is me reading up on all of the applied energetic stuff and the quest to understand it. But a super cool thing I can do is place an annihilation plane, which is the block destroyer, at the max world height, and that'll automatically generate me skystone dust. That's a super neat way to do it. I'll probably just harvest some skystone from under the water instead. It's a bit quicker. One thing I always thought was a funny coincidence, crystal resonance, just like Baraka and Arc Recode, which is one of my favorite games. Again, just thought this was funny because like that's her whole kind of ability thing. But anyways, this is one of the necessary blocks to actually power applied energetic stuff. Well, I guess you don't need it to power the inscribers, cause you know, you need those first. Since I have the ability to create pretty much anything at this point, it was super easy to make the entire ME system. One of the coolest parts is the fact I can actually replicate most of the stuff in Applied Energetics. This will come in super handy because that means I can make all of the storage parts a whole lot easier later on. The main issue is that it eats up a ton of nether matter, which is also kind of hard to come by. My eventual solution was to make a whole lot more basalt generators and start feeding those into the deconstructors. It was actually one of my best ideas ever. Since I'm going to want interdimensional and way further wireless ME access later on, I need to make a singularity. That is a very difficult thing because you need, I believe, 256,000 items. The best way I can think of to do that is improving my cobblestone generators. To do that, I need the Empowerer, a transformed diamond, a netherite ingot, and 2 pieces of deep slate. All relatively easy. Here is something absolutely insane I found from an airdrop. This is a time crystal. And yeah, the weird FOV effect, that's the time crystal. It's an interesting thing. I'm not 100% sure how to get it right now, but I know it's later on in the story. But here's the insane thing I didn't think of until a bit later on. I have 2 of them. You know what I can do with 2 time crystals? I can make a creative flight upgrade for my armor. Again, it took me a little bit to realize that, but yeah, that's gonna come in insanely handy. That is probably the best drop I've found from the airdrops. Well, it's hard to say, because those compressed iron blocks did look really cool, being able to control machine temperature just like that. I found a few wandering merchants over time, but this red merchant from Supplementaries has this screen. It's from that one meme. Alright, I have to admit this is a pretty funny reference. He's not selling anything super useful, but I just found this funny and had to include it. While I was scrolling through recipes, I found a super neat one for a potion of flying. It requires a bunch of materials, but I have all of them. The main things were obviously phantom membranes, and then fermented spider eye to make the levitating, and then a popped chorus fruit to actually make the flying. It's super cool. And this gives me creative flight for 8 minutes. It's pretty awesome for how relatively cheap it is to make. I wish I'd known about this way sooner. So that is certainly an option if you have the materials early on. Which, considering how easy the proto chorus is to make, yeah, it's actually not too bad. Here's another major reason I love the replicator so much. I can legitimately just make whatever I need now. I don't have to go through the whole fuss of making every single tier of hammer. I can just make a straight up netherite hammer. It's that easy. It's at this point that I finally realized I can make a flight upgrade with the time crystals. I'm super excited to finally fly. Well, permanently at least. The only real issue is I don't actually have feathers. I have no clue where the original feathers went. Oh, and of course, interrupting airdrop. To get the feathers, I had to do the gate that I did in the last video to get all of the mobs. Yes, it's the only way I could think to get chickens. Sure, I could throw down eggs and get a chance, but those are baby chickens and I'd have to make them grow up. Yeah, that sounds way worse than just spawning this entire gate. Alright, now I can make the flight upgrade. Yes, it only took me that long. Another neat upgrade I found was actually step assist. Now, I don't use step assist normally because it kinda sucks, but I should have been using it the entire time because I swear I've wasted more time landing in this run because of my super jump than anything else. I'm not even kidding. So this is gonna save me a whole lot of time. Not that I really need it anymore though, because I literally have creative flight now. But yeah, I have that, and now my life is infinitely easier. You're all probably wondering what I've been working on in the background. Well, does this explain it? Yes, it's an entirely new resource setup. So what do I need all of these resources for? Well, you see, if I want a bunch of those rift crystals that let me stay there for longer, I'm going to need to automate everything in Oritech, because they require a lot of Oritech stuff. So that's what I need to do here. While it's certainly going to be interesting, it's also going to take a very long time to get everything set up. So I'm going to skip a lot throughout this process, trust me. I've done all of this stuff before, but now I'm just making it, automated. As much as I love the Applied Energetic Storage System, I am still using the Integrated Dynamics one a whole lot. I'm literally going to have these two wireless tablets in my inventory for the rest of the run, because they're both just so useful. I have a lot more like single items and unstackable stuff in my Integrated Dynamics, because I can put way more chests in there. But I'm going to put all of my new and advanced stuff in the Applied Energetic Storage System. It is a little annoying when something is in one and not the other, but again, that's why I have both tablets right now. To actually get the wireless terminal to work, I need to make a ton of these wireless boosters. The Fluix dust is the most expensive part, but I have plenty of resources to make it. It also makes the ME system take way more power, but thankfully I have the capacity for it now. I still haven't made the lightning rod that I was hoping to do earlier on. Maybe that's like an end game goal, because I'd love to see how much power it makes, but that lightning strike is a perfect example of why I should have made it. The main thing that's going to take me a long time to do, to set up all of the automation, is actually make all the machines and add-ons I need. You see, that's kind of the problem. I need to make the machines to build the machines. And currently I don't have many machines to process stuff, so it's going to take a very long time. I don't want to skip everything that I'm doing, but I really want to mention every single thing that I am doing. So here's platinum processing. I'm using another bedrock extractor to mine the platinum, then I'm putting it in a fragment forge to get fluxite out of it. It goes through some further processing to make the clumps and everything so I can get even more fluxite, and it's eventually smelted into platinum ingots. So there's 2 more ingredients that I need done. Another airdrop I got gave me one of the best items I could have found, an Awakened Supremium Paxel. You see, I wanted to get this for a long time, but you can't actually craft these. Trust me, I've looked at all the recipes. I'm pretty sure the only source is the airdrops, which would make some sense. But now I have pretty much the ultimate tool. Sure, there are other options, but one of my favorites, the mining tools, can't actually mine a ton of blocks. Usually when it comes to like machines and stuff. I use them mostly because of how easy it is to make the Fortune and Silk Touch upgrades. But the Paxel is my main tool. So I've been doing a ton of reading and all sorts of quests for integrated dynamic stuff to make the factory work and everything like that. The cool thing is that a lot of the missions give you unique rewards. Well, unique rewards from a loot pool, that is. And one of the rewards I got was something I didn't even know existed in this pack. It's one of the best finds ever. You guys remember in the last episode and earlier how I always complained about phantoms being the worst thing they ever added? The Insomnia Charm is the solution to all of my problems. I had the Soul Lantern in the charm slot, that's why I couldn't find it at first, but thankfully I can move the Soul Lantern into the belt slot. This Insomnia Charm literally disables phantom spawns. Yeah, and it's pretty easy to craft too. That's right, you can craft it. It just takes some phantom membranes and other easy stuff. Well, this is another item I wish I knew about way earlier on, because this is insanity. I didn't know if it would work at first, but after a little bit of waiting, I could tell, yeah, it works and it is awesome. Easily one of the best items in this pack. I can work forever now without having to sleep. You're probably wondering what I've been working on. Well, I'm using a bunch of the integrated dynamic stuff to write variables to these cards. These cards and item exporters allow me to export certain items, or items on a list, which is a neat thing, but I just need individual stuff for now. In this example, I'm exporting gold and netherite scraps so that I can make netherite bars. I wanted to use integrated dynamics to make this all work, because if I was using just the normal pipes, well, let's just say that's not possible. It would be a spaghetti nightmare. Integrated dynamics is the only reason this factory works. I understand why this mod is so good now. It is insanely useful and very versatile. One material I completely forgot that I need up until now is coal. So how do I get coal? I need it to make carbon fiber for some of the recipes. My best idea is actually wither skeleton data from hostile mob networks. The only tiny issue is that I have to set up automation of clay and glass to actually make the prediction matrices. That's also a complicated word. Thankfully, since I had the entire process of cobblestone to dust automated, Well, I can easily make clay with dirt and water in Oritech, and glass is, well, obviously smelting sand. So it's way easier than I thought, but it's still kind of complicated. I don't know how long it's been, but I finally managed to get 3 machines set up. Alright, I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but these create the very important alloys in Oritech. You have the duratum, which is platinum and netherite. You have the adamant, which is nickel and diamond. And then you have the other one, which I can never remember, but I believe it is flux and nickel. One super interesting that I decided to do was add iron upgrades to all of these drawers. Iron upgrades actually reduce the capacity of the drawers. So instead of 2000 or 2048, whatever that number is, it's only 1 stack, so 64. This is just so that I don't use up all of my resources by accident. Since I have coal, I put it into a crusher and then a centrifuge to get the carbon fiber strands that I need. I made a massive setup of this because I don't know how many I'm going to need, but this was definitely overkill, let's just say that. But again, there's no kill like overkill. Another thing I forgot about was plastic. Now you might be wondering, I set up plastic earlier, so I'll be using that one, right? Well, no, because I need that plastic for other stuff in crafting, and I don't really want to transport it all the way over here. Yes, I know there are teleporting pipes and ways to do that, but no, I'd rather build a whole new system with Oritech, because even though this looks like a lot of work, well, okay, it is, but I'm having a ton of fun figuring out and setting up all of these machines and stuff. I really do enjoy factory games and stuff like that, and the puzzle solving is super fun. Okay, not puzzle solving, I'm not a huge fan of puzzles, but like figuring out how to do everything and make it all work. That's what I enjoy. One other material I completely forgot I would need is steel. Now, you see a couple of problems here. Steel is annoying to make, because there aren't actually many options for getting it. I decided to go with a bunch of coke coal ovens, and then use a foundry to make steel with the coke coal and iron, but this is definitely not the best way. I'm not 100% sure what the best way would be, but I'm guessing the steel seeds in a garden cloche has to be way faster than this process. Actually, now that I think about it, it definitely would be faster. So don't do the coke coal method. That's only good early game when it's, well, your only option. Since one of the recipes needs amethyst, the amethyst seeds I made way earlier on come in handy yet again. It's pretty simple. It just goes into a garden cloche and then 2 crafters so I can make the actual amethyst blocks, and boom, I have amethyst. I really like how simple this entire recipe was. After taking a look at all the automated crafting tables, I decided to use the RF tools ones because you can actually put cobblestone or other junk items in the item slots to block them, so that you don't have tons of one resource in there and, well, waste all of that resource. I did it with Endric compound in the first one, but that's because that's super easy to make. Oh yeah, I guess I should mention that I made the Endric compound using ender pearls that were also gained from mob data. So the mob data automation has 2 purposes, which is super cool. The last item that was a little bit annoying is the overcharged crystals. This is obviously because they cannot stack. Thankfully, if I just put an upgrade into the drawer, I can stack up to 8 at once, making it a little bit better. All of the machines up to now were extremely easy to automate. The real trouble comes with the atomic forges. First of all, you can't place anything on top of them because the Endric lasers will actually mine anything on top, and they're very difficult to manage. Thankfully, Integrated Dynamics imports the items super fast, and you can actually change all sorts of properties. The main problem is that you always have to preload everything before I set all the filters, or else items will just go in completely different slots. And the biggest issue with Atomic Forges is the fact you can't actually choose like which item goes into what slot, unlike other machines. I haven't had to do it up until now, but I'm very concerned about how I'm going to get the overcharged crystals into this machine, because if you remember, overcharged crystals cannot stack. So I'm concerned that they'll get overridden by the other item that needs to go in with them. I believe that's going to be a major problem. Thankfully, with enough messing around, I did manage to get it to work how I was hoping, where it should always prioritize inputting the overcharged crystals over the stackable ingots. Considering it made a ton of Promethium, it did manage to work in the end. I just wish I didn't have to mess around with it this much. It's really stupid that you can't configure the Atomic Forge more. I understand why there are no add-on slots, but it would be very nice for automating stuff like this. But after, who knows how many hours, it's finally done. I've automated just about everything in Oritech, except for Endrick lenses because I don't actually need those just yet. I have no clue how I would automate the echo shards. The replicator's the only thing I can think of for those. But with that, I have Promethium automated, the most complicated resource in Oritech, and I can make as much of it as I please. That is beautiful. That was my major goal, and now it's complete, which also means this is nearing the end of the video. I was really hoping that I could just make this a two-part video, but with how much more there is still to do, and I have a ton of other neat ideas that I want to finish up, yeah, there's no way this could have been a two-part video. It's going to be a three-parter, especially because there's so much Rift stuff that I still have to do. Well, Rift, Oritech, yeah, there's like a trillion things I want to keep doing in this pack. But I hope you enjoyed watching as much as I did playing, because again, this is my favorite mod pack. I love all of it. I can't wait to get back to playing it once I'm done editing this video. Since I haven't started playing at the time of editing this, here's a few things I'm really excited for. 1, I want to get the Oritech Particle Collider. It can make some super cool stuff, and it would just be neat to build. I want to work a lot with the Extreme Reactors mod. Because there's so many cool new things in it, I'm not crazy about the turbines, but like all the different fuels and insane ingots, I would love to get those. The Energizer would also be neat to make, even though it's just a giant power storage. Still, it sounds insanely cool. This run added 40 more hours to my run, which means it's at a total of 70, and I'm nowhere near done yet. But that's mostly because I want to build a bunch of cool stuff. But again, I'm having an insane amount of fun with this run. Now that I have everything prepared for next episode, it's finally time for me to go. Thank you all for watching, I truly do appreciate it. And I hope you enjoyed the video. And a special thank you to all of my channel members. All of you guys are awesome. I hope you guys are excited for next time, because even though I haven't played it, I know it's just going to get even cooler and more insane. But anyways, this is going to be Enzo from LookIntoGaming, signing out.